Hello and welcome to the Soul Sync podcast. I'm Jason Paul. Now, today's episode is really about one question. How do you live with grief when love doesn't end? Because grief is something that at some point almost all of us will experience, and yet when it arrives, it can feel incredibly isolating. It can feel like the world has changed shape around you, like everything has lost its colour, and like no one quite understands what's going on inside of you. So my guest today is Tom Rose. He's the author of a book called Balloon in a Box, Coping with Grief. And yet what I found so powerful about Tom is that he doesn't speak about grief from theory, he speaks from lived experience. After losing his wife, someone he had spent nearly 60 years of his life with, Tom found himself navigating a depth of loss that most of us can only begin to imagine. And what came from that was not just pain, but insight, not just heartbreak, but understanding. And in this conversation, we explore what grief actually feels like. Not the clinical version, not the textbook version, but the real human experience of it. We talk about anticipatory grief, the moments of leading up to loss, and then the silence that follows, and the unexpected ways grief shows up in everyday life. Tom really does share this in a really beautiful way, and it was very powerful. And through the concept of his book, it really explores that something doesn't just disappear when someone dies as well. Tom talks about his journey of love, and also without love, there is no grief. So this is a gentle conversation, an honest one, and it's for anyone who's lost someone. You know, you might be supporting someone at the moment in such a situation. So on that note, I will leave you with this conversation. So Tom, welcome onto the Soul Sync podcast.
Thank you.
Well, it's a delight to have you here. I've been looking forward to talking to you. So, first of all, tell us about you and your story.
Well, you got 3 or 4 hours?
Well, do you know, I could probably go for 3 or 4 hours. I'm not sure anyone else could, though.
Okay.
But I guess your story really came to resonance, 5 years ago.
Right. Well, prior to the whole thing is by the book that I wrote after my wife passed away. But prior to my wife dying, I was in the advertising and marketing business. In college, I was in theater arts and speaking and all that kind of stuff. But my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2004 and 2005. At that time, we were doing a cooking show together on the local Fox affiliate. And when we found out she had we'd done the cooking thing for about 13 years. And when we found out she had breast cancer, we stopped the TV, and she had chemo, mastectomy, and everything in 2004, and again in 2005. But then everything was great. She was cancer free until 2017. 2017, it came back in the chest wall, and they told her she had 6 to 8 months, and she lived 2 years. It was a tough time for us, knowing, and anticipatory grief, as we call it, knowing that it's going to happen. But you kind of blank it out for a while. You go along and everything seems to be going nice, even though the ultimate thing is there. So we had a good year and a half or so together. We still did the things. We still went out to dinner with our folks. She had a tube in her chest that we had to drain every 2 days, but she was doing some chemo and some radiation also, but we still did things. I mean, she sucked it up and she wanted to do things. In fact, about a month before she died, she was taking an elderly person to a neighboring town to have their eye exam. So she was still active and doing things. So I guess to start that story, we had this chest tube, I said, and she was doing radiation. The cancer moved to the brain. And so we were doing radiation for that. And I had to do this test tube every 2 days. And all of a sudden I was having a little trouble draining it. And so when we went to the doctor that day for the radiation treatment. I said, hey, doc, we're having trouble with this, tube. It's not draining like it always was. So he said, well, let's skip the radiation. Let's get you down to another department here. And he said, let's get this taken care of before we move forward. I said, okay. So long story short, she's admitted to the hospital on a Monday. On Tuesday, it's plan A. On Wednesday, it's plan B. Thursday, it's plan A and B. On Friday, it's what plan are we going to do? On Saturday morning, she says to me, Tom, I'm done. I just want peace and quiet. I want no more poking, prodding. I don't want any more pills. I don't want any more radiation. I don't want any more chemo. I just want peace. So I told the nurse, I said, my wife has made a decision. She'd like to go into hospice. And the nurse said, well, Monday, this is Saturday, she said, Monday, the hospice nurse will come in and explain everything to you. So now I race home and knowing that she's going to go into hospice, right? I've got to clean the house. So Saturday night and Sunday, I'm clean. I mean, this place was spotless. You could eat off the bathroom floor because I know hospice is coming. There's going to be people in the house. Mm-hmm. We go on Monday, and Monday morning, the nurse comes in and she said, Mrs. Rose, she said, you have two choices. You can stay here in the hospital for hospice or you can go home. And my wife says, I want to stay here in the hospital. Now, that was like a stab in the chest to me. I'm thinking, she doesn't want to be home with me? But now I know, after we got into it, that she did that for me. She didn't want me to have to do anything. In the hospital, the nurses did everything. All I had to do was be there. And I was there 24/7, basically. My family would come in the afternoons about 4 o'clock and relieve me for a couple hours. So I'd go home, shower, and eat. But I was there, 20 hours, 22 hours a day. Mm-hmm. Interesting to me then was I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't read. All I could do was sit there and hold her hand and feel her pain. Now, she was in hospice for 3 weeks. If you think about sitting for 18, 15, 20 hours a day and just thinking for 3 weeks, a lot of things in your life will change. You will discover things maybe about yourself that you really don't like. We're all selfish. Didn't realize how selfish you are until you really think about it. I questioned all my beliefs. I didn't change them. I questioned them all. But so I sat there and it just all I could do was think. So long story short, here on where she was in hospice, I'm saying for 3 weeks. The Thursday before she died, my granddaughter's graduated from college with theater arts and singing. She's got a beautiful voice, does all kinds of plays and productions. And my wife had said, I won't get to see Amanda sing again. And so I told the family that, and Amanda came that night. I came home to shower and everything. I guess she put a concert on for the whole wing of the hospital. She did about 20 songs and, so. But anyway, I go back and, in the hospital about 8:30 at night, they turn the lights down and it gets real quiet. Now, all of a sudden, my wife, now she's been there almost 3 weeks, nothing but pain pills and water. She sits up in bed and she looks at me and she points her finger at me and she says, we have to talk. Now, if you knew my wife when she said, we have to talk, we're going to talk.
You're in trouble, Tom.
That's right. So, So she says to me, we talked about a lot of things. And she said, now, look, I don't want all those videos and all the photographs and all that stuff at the funeral home. I just want what's in the green bag in the closet. I didn't know there was a green bag in the closet, but I did find it. And so I said, okay. And she said, there's a closed casket because I want everybody to remember me the way I was, not the way I am now. And I said, yeah, I understand. So we sat there a little bit and we talked a little more. And finally, she takes my hand and she squeezes it. And she says, I love you. I'll see you in church. Now, I think it's just like a woman. She had to leave me with a command. She couldn't leave me with, I love you. She had to zing me. She had to say, I'll see you in church. That's the last she said to me on that Thursday night. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, she passed away. So my last thing from my wife was a command. I have to go to church. I cannot not go to church.
Was you someone that always kind of attended church prior to that?
Oh yes, oh yeah. We're Catholic. We were Catholic, so we went to mass every Sunday, and she was a very good Catholic. I was, I'm there with her. I'm much better now than I was before. Probably. You're going to hear something in the background. Do you hear it at all? I hear them mowing the grass. They just
Oh
went
no!
by.
This is the beauty of Zoom. I can't hear anything. So all I can hear is your lovely voice.
Well, good. So anyhow, she passed on Monday. I was there. Actually closed her eyes. I remember the nurse coming in and saying, I'm starting to get up, leaving. The nurse come in and said, well, Mr. Rose, you could stay. I said, no reason to stay. She's not here. She's gone. So then is when it starts to, it doesn't really start to set in yet because there's too many things happening. That's Monday evening. The family came in with me here at the house, and we sat and talked, and I think we probably had a couple of glasses of wine. And I went to bed, and I think I really slept that night because I hadn't slept for 3 weeks. It's hard to sleep in a hospital on one of those chairs, one of those lounge chairs. And so Tuesday, it's the funeral home making the arrangements, and Wednesday, it's people calling and coming, and Thursday, it was a visitation. Now, the visitation at the funeral home, we had about 450 people go through. That's where I started to learn lessons. I always remember before going to the funeral home and standing in line and saying, what am I going to say when I get up there? Oh, he was a nice guy when maybe he really wasn't. All the things that were said to me, I know people meant well, but some of them were just crazy. You shouldn't, you say. I was in my book and in my speaking things, I tell people, hey, don't say this. Don't say, how are you doing? I must have said, oh, I'm okay, 400 sometimes when I really wanted to tell them something else, which I can't repeat, Yeah. People came and one person came up and said, well, God needed her up there more than you needed her down here. I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm sorry. God's got a whole bunch. I just wanted one, People said, just wild things. I then say, there's a whole bunch of nice things you can say, but the best thing you can say to somebody is, I love you. Give them a hug and say, I love you. When you say that, you say everything. You say, I'm here for you. I'll do, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of learned those lessons with that. Now, the next day, Friday's the funeral. And it's kind of a blur. It still is. They had this with Catholic Mass funeral. Afterwards, the typical funeral dinner in the school hall, with the green bean casserole, as we say here. I don't know in England, but in the States, it's green bean casserole and slices of ham, So that's every one I've ever been to. There has to be that green bean casserole. But so we had that dinner, and then back at my house, and it was in August, so it was a beautiful night, and I have a nice deck. My deck looks out over the golf course and over the cemetery, believe it or not. And a bunch of friends came, and again, I'm sure we drank several bottles of wine. The evening goes on, and people start to leave, and all of a sudden, it's 9:00, and everybody's gone. And I'm sitting there by myself, and I'm going, I don't want to go in that house, because she's not there. Now, we've been together for 59 years, so that's hard,
It's a very, very long time.
So I finally managed to go in and go to bed. Got up the next morning, and I tell everybody that's when my black period began. Everything was black and white. I didn't care about anything. The kick got out of my life. I said, get away from me. You didn't do what I wanted. Leave me alone, I hid it from most people. I'm not my family. But my family was very patient. They didn't try to fix anything. They let me go. They were there for me. I knew that, but they didn't bug me. For 4 months, I spent in my black period, okay? I went out and played golf with my guys, and I went to dinner with some friends, but I wasn't there. I watched TV, but the old TV programs that I enjoyed and laughed at weren't funny anymore. Finally, if you could see my home, it's the open concept. It's a villa on the golf course, as we call it here, a villa. It's an open concept. So there's a kitchen, a countertop, bar stools, dining area to one direction, and living room to the other. Now, I told you earlier that my wife and I both cooked. And so Again, when I was in college, I studied theater arts and all that kind of stuff and movies. Now, if you were going to write a movie scene, you could write one on what happened. You have to picture this little old pathetic guy sitting at the counter with his dinner and his glass of wine and a bottle sitting there. Off to one direction is the fireplace going, okay? Over the other direction is Frank Sinatra singing on my stereo, okay? And it's November, and it's cold, and the wind's blowing, and the sleep nice is hitting the back window, okay? So that's the scene. You got to, like I said, it'd be a great movie scene. You could have the camera looking at a lot of things. So I'm sitting there. I drank my glass of wine with dinner, and then I drank another one, and then, hey, you don't want to leave wine in that bottle. So I poured another glass of wine, and I remember getting up, and I think I was going to walk to change the music, but I caught my foot on the bar stool next to me, fell fortunately into the living room on the carpet. I'm laying there on the carpet, and I'm thinking, what would she think of me? This pathetic guy, self-pity, all the things I was doing to myself. Her favorite saying was, "It is what it is. Put on your big boy pants and deal with it." I must have heard that 5,000 times in my life. Whenever I was down, something was wrong, she'd just grab a hold of my ear and say, "Hey."
That kind of really gives me a picture of her character with such a saying.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm thinking that, and I'm thinking, what would she think of me? Now, Jason, I don't think I really cried. I mean, I'm sure I shed a tear at the funeral home and at the cemetery and places, but I hadn't really cried. I got up at night and sat in my chair, in front of the fireplace, and I cried. I cried bucketfuls. I was wringing wet. I remember going to bed and thinking, oh, tomorrow is going to be miserable. I got up the next day, and there was sunshine. There was color. And I knew I had to face grief. I had to take it on. I had to put on my big boy pants. And I thought, okay, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. I said, hey, God, you better come back because I think I'm going to need you. But how do I handle this grief? And someone had told me grief is like a ball in a box. When it bounces around in the box and touches a side, a memory comes back. If it touches a corner, 2 or 3 emotions happen at once, hard to handle. But I'm thinking, you know what? No. It's more like a balloon in a box. Because if you've got a balloon on a string and you want the balloon to move left and you move it, the balloon may go right. The balloon's hard to control. So I think, okay, that's what it is. And that's what I'm going to do. That balloon is here on my finger, and I have to learn to control it. No one else can do it for me. In that balloon are all my memories, all my emotions, everything are in there. And I've got to learn to control it. And like I say, no one can help me. And so that's what I learned to do. That wasn't easy. I had my moments, but I have learned over actually it's just been a little over 5 years, 2 weeks ago, August 5th. I've learned to control a balloon. I've learned to control my grief. It's never going away. No one can fix it. Only me. And I just control it. And what I've done is, I've gotten rid of most of the bad memories out of that balloon. Only thing I've kept there are the fun ones and the happy ones and getting married, having a son, a lot of things, doing the cooking things together. I'll tell you a couple stories. I'll tell you a story. Like I say, that was August and November. And after I call that my epiphany that night, the next morning was my epiphany. All of a sudden I knew. And that was like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. And my kids said to me, hey, Dad, you go ahead and do the turkey like you always do. They always come to our house. It was a bigger place, easier to have it. So, and they said, we're going to bring everything else. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay. So now you have to picture me at my little butcher block countertop with my turkey, and I'm stuffing it with the herbs and fruit and all the stuff I put in it. And tie the legs, and I get ready to, I need somebody to put their finger on that knot. And it was the same thing every year. She'd always put her finger there, and then she'd always say, who helped you tie your Boy Scout knots?
Mhm.
And we get a big chuckle. Now, my wife was a brown-eyed brunette. And I believe one year I told her a little blue-eyed blonde, and I think I got a dish rag side of the face, you know. So I stood there that night, that Thanksgiving. I think I dropped a few little tears, but I also laughed. If you'd have walked in the house, you'd have probably hauled me off to the funny farm because this guy's really lost and he's laughing, he's crying, you know. But those are the memories that come back, the little ones that you think you've forgotten about that all of a sudden come back. So, but because that was our life, we sing to each other. Like I say, she got the last one in when she said, I have to go to church, but I'm kind of saving one. If I get up there and I do, if I do get there and do find her, I got one for her. So that's where, and then, the book. So what happens is, this is November, get through the holiday season. I did everything like we always did. I decided I had to do that. I had a good holiday season. Shortly after that, a friend called me, doctor friend from college. And he said, well, I'm calling to see how you're doing, buddy. And we talked. And he said, are you journaling? And I said, well, yeah, kind of. I said, I get up in the morning and I write down how I feel. That night I write down, what happened during the day. And he said, send me your notes. And he's a doctor. I said, well, Doc, I said, they're not even sentences, punctuated. He said, sometimes they're just words. He said, send them to me. So I sent them to him. About a week or two later, he called me and he said, hey, buddy, he said, you got to write a book. I said, whoa, wait a minute, Doc. I said, we went to college together. You sat next to me in English class. You know I didn't pay attention, and I know you didn't pay attention. That's why you're a doctor. So we had a good chuckle, and he said, no, I'm serious. He said, you poured your guts out. And he said, people need to hear that. People need to hear what you're doing, how you're handling it. So now it's COVID year, right? I can't go anyplace, can't do anything. I'm here in this place by myself. And it's later that year, it's winter. And so I thought, hey, what the heck, might as well write a book. Nothing else to do, let's write a book. Okay. So I remember again, now you're going to think I'm a wino, and maybe I am. But I sat down one night at 8 o'clock, my little glass of wine here. 8 o'clock, started typing, typed a page. Punctuation, fixed it, fixed the spelling, fixed the paragraph, fixed everything. It's a beautiful page. And then I thought, an author has to use big words. So I went to the thesaurus and I started changing words, Got up the next morning and read it and thought, who the heck wrote this? What does that word mean? I tried that two or three times with the same results. Finally, one night, I decided again, I got my glass of wine. It's a crummy night. I remember it's that same snow and sleet stuff, okay, on the window. And I thought, no, write it like you would tell Jace. Write it like you would tell somebody, just the way you would talk about it. So I started in typing, and I didn't worry about punctuation, didn't worry about spelling, just typed. Mm-hmm. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had page after page after page. So a few months later, I was able to take those pages and other pages and my journal notes and things that people had talked to me about and told me. And so I wrote a book and called it Balloon in a Box.
It's interesting what you say. You're a very good storyteller. And I think that what you said about journaling, I think that I found that to be very healing. People have told me to journal for a very long time, and it's only in the last 4 months that I've started doing it myself. Doing it regularly on a daily basis, and it's really helped me as well. I imagine the process of writing that down was quite healing in itself for you.
It was.
And I guess the people come across this show, quite often because they're going through grief themselves. I guess, what have you kind of learned about, healing and accepting, and, what lessons have you learned that are kind of contained within the book? And I ask this question on behalf of other people who, are going through it themselves.
Yeah. Well, I guess the piece it together a little bit, which will explain a little bit and answer some of those questions. What happened was I wrote the book and I got it done and I kind of read it. That's not too bad. Now, I was advertising and marketing business all my life. So, a printer, I said, well, I'll print a couple hundred copies, give some away, maybe sell some, and that'll be it. Well, a local service organization asked me to come speak. And I thought, okay, I'll go speak. I kind of caught lightning in a bottle because 131 speeches later, I'm still telling the story. But what happened was I got cocky and thought, okay, I'm a writer now. People like my book. I'm a writer, so I'll write a novel. So I wrote a novel, and I thought, well, I'm not self-publishing this. I'm going to find a publisher, which I did. And then he found out that I wrote the book Balloon in a Box, and he said, I'd like to have that book. He said, I want you to change it. What I would like you to do is leave it the way it is, but at the end of each chapter, put down what you've learned over these speaking engagements. In that time, I'd probably done 40 or 50. What you've learned talking to people. So, answer your question. First of all, I mentioned before, you can't fix it. Okay, so don't try. If somebody's grieving, don't try to fix it. Number two, I think I know what the griever needs. The griever needs to find the words, say the words, and know those words been heard. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to say, folks, just wait, listen to me. My heart's broken. Just listen to me. You don't have to talk to me. Just listen. Let me fill my guts. Other thing I've learned is grief is not just about losing a loved one. You can go through grief from retiring. You can go through grief from an illness, from all of a sudden a handicap comes along. Very interesting. There's a group that I went and spoke to. Is called Living in LITE, Living in Transition Every Day. And it's a widespread kind of group. You have people in it that have lost spouses, lost loved ones, people just got out of jail, people recovering from drug rehab, divorces, all this. Anyway, I went down and spoke to the group, and then the man that runs the group said, may I use your book for my grief group? I said, certainly, you go. So he called me one time and he said, hey, I've done 3 grief groups with your book, and it's really going well. I just wanted to thank you for allowing me to use the book. And he said, if you're ever down this 50 miles from where I live, he said, if you're ever down this way, stop in. We do it on Tuesday nights and everything. So I was that way one time, and I thought, I'll just try. I didn't want to be part of it. I just went in, I sat back in the corner and listened. Now, this is a lesson that I learned that night. I could say there were about 12 people. Now, if you picture a man sitting close to the moderator who'd lost his wife, and around the table, all these other people, drug rehab, getting out of jail. And back at the back end of the table, almost catty corner, like the table where this guy was sitting, were 2 ladies that were divorced. And so that night, he does journaling, how he runs the class. Everybody has a little book, and that night he wanted to talk about feelings, which is one of the chapters in my book. And he said, because he said, for 3 minutes, let's everybody write down how we feel today. So everybody wrote, and he got done, and he read his. And then he said, anybody like to share? You don't have to, but would anybody like to share? And the man that lost his wife, I think he'd been married 40 years or something like that. He read his, and then one of the divorced ladies, clear at the other end of the table, read hers. They said the same thing. He lost a life partner. She lost a life. Hers had been about 40 years to being married. All of a sudden, those 40 years were gone. Tried to forget, So that was one of the interesting things I learned. The other thing is everybody has grief differently. Things happen differently. They feel differently. They don't go through the same thing. That's one of the things that I think when it first happened to me, I went online and I was looking for help. And most of the stuff I read was, I'll say, too clinical, too college professorish, where they we're standing up above you telling you we know everything, you know nothing. And wait a minute, I'm the one that's feeling it. How do I know nothing, I found a couple good things, again, written by people who had gone through it. It's the old, I don't know whether you have, it's the old expression here is that if you can't do it, you teach it. So yeah, kind of, like we always tell our professors in college, you can't really do it, you just teach it. So that was kind of the thing I got. So I thought, that was part of the reason for writing the book, write what it really like for someone. It's different for everybody. I always say it's different for everybody, but the same. I mean, the same ache, the same heartache,
Was the motivation of the book to help other people who are grieving, or was it more, writing through your experiences of coping with grief,
Well, first of all, it was to get my buddy and my son off my back to write it. Okay, just go ahead and do it, I think when I got to doing the second edition, and I started to write those things at the end of each chapter, what I've learned, and maybe some, I didn't change things. I probably expanded some things that I had read. Yeah, it got to be for me. But I wrote in the book, if I helped one other person, I help. I help, it's a success because I help myself. One of the things that happens, Jason, is, and this has been kind of interesting to me, and somebody asked me about it the other day after a speaking engagement, and they said, you do this, you've done this 130 times. Does it hurt to do it? Does it bring it all back? Is it, because I'm telling the same things again? I feel when I do my speaking engagement and I talk about that and talk about my story about the turkey, my wife, about my wife saying, I love you, I'll see you in church. I feel that all like it's just happening. Okay. Because it's in my mind. It's emblazoned in my brain, what I'm seeing. So, So yes and no. I told the people, I said, yes, it kind of does. After I do something and I get done and I get in the car, I usually have to decompress just a little bit, wipe my mind out and say, okay, think about, okay, tomorrow you're going to do this and you're going to play golf there and then you got dinner tomorrow night. And so you got to get what you just did in there, feeling out of you again. So yes, it does, but no, it's well worth it. It's worth it for me, and it's worth it for other people. I get the stories, people telling me how I've helped them. I just got a letter here today from somebody that had my book, and it was a gentleman, lost his wife, and he was telling me how much it helped to read the book, to know what somebody else felt, that what he was feeling was not wrong. That's the other thing. That's the other thing. See, I don't call it a journey of grief. I call it a journey of love, because without love, there is no grief. You don't grieve for somebody you didn't love. So mine's a journey of love. So I tell people, hey, everybody's going to go on the journey. Can't stop it for you. Can't change it for you. But maybe what I can do is take a few bumps and potholes in the road of that journey out for you. So when you get to those, you don't feel like you're the only person that ever was there, the only person that ever got angry. Because some people get this. I've had people tell me they've never gotten angry. I got angry. I remember and this was 2 years, probably.
I think that's a very normal emotion, though, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Why me? Why this? Well, this is unfair.
Right.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I think it's a beautiful thing that you've done writing this book. And when I was reading through all of the notes before we got talking today, that was why I was so kind of keen to get you on the show, because of, the very subject matter. And, I think that it's, a beautiful story, hearing you sort of talk through that and the relationship that you had with your wife. Yeah, I can't imagine being a single man myself, Tom, what it's even like to be with someone more than 5 years. I think that says a lot about my relationship history, let alone, the time that you and your wife spent together. So if people do want to find out more about the book, it will be in the show notes. Balloon in a Box, Coping with Grief. And well, you should know the name of it because it's been behind you, Tom, the whole time. If you haven't got the name of it now, you never will. There it is. I'm going to ask you to close the show today with a final thought or a pearl of wisdom. What would you like to leave us on today, Tom?
Well, very simply, what I've learned is that life continues and you need to embrace the changes. That's basically it.
Very, very, very wise words. I think you can apply that in many different ways. And I think you made a very good point earlier on as well about, grief. It isn't always, losing someone. We can all experience grief in different ways.
Yes.
Tom, it's been lovely to have you on. Thank you so much for coming on to the Soul Sync podcast.
Thank you, Jason.